Hello everybody, Blue here. So today we're continuing our FAQ sessions with fur, materials, and how to use them. So some of the first thing that I wanted to go over is just basic scissors types. Now I don't remember what these are called. I think they have something to do with layering. They've got little teeth on them. These are hair cutting scissors. These come in handy when you need to make cuts into the fur to trim it down but not leave behind any kind of line in the fur. This gives a really nice uneven layered effect. There's obviously pet shavers are very popular in this profession or hobby. There's fabric shears, which I feel are honestly like irreplaceable. There is also scalpels or box cutters, which you would use when cutting the fur. When you're making the pattern, you would lay it on the fur side down to where the backing is up and cut along the backing with this. It's actually really handy. And then there's just plain old regular scissors. And then there's your brush. I'll go into brush care in a different video, but basically this is your best friend when it comes to like styling the fur, getting it the way you want it. It's basically awesome. You want it to be double-sided because you want this comb side, but you also want this bristle side. So now that that's out of the way, I'll move that stuff over. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is actually fur and fur quality. Now, you can get fur from many different places. There's obviously Amazon, but one of my favorite places to get it is actually from fursuit companies. So companies that offer supplies for fursuits often offer supplies for fur, basically. So one of my favorite ones, I have them written down. The place I get mine is Big Z Fabrics. They have a wide range of different kinds of fur, and actually all of the samples that I have here with me today are from them. Now, I do suggest that you pay to get some samples from them, because it gives you a really good idea for what kind of fur you are going to want to use for different projects. So we're going to go over different fur types. I roughly estimated around where the quality is with these furs, so we're going to start with the lowest quality fur types. The first one is basically bottom of the barrel, I feel like, in terms of art doll making, and that's mainly because if you look at it, the wefts, or the little bits of fur, it is really easy to see that backing. Like, you just barely pull it apart, you see the backing. You go like this and you see the backing, and that's like a big key part. If you can't like wrap the fur around your pinky without seeing the backing with an art doll, that's a problem, because anytime you go to wrap it around a leg, you're still gonna see that backing. So yeah, it's a problem. And the black version of this is actually a really good example of how they flocked the fabric. Now, I think the technical term for that is probably knit or something, but I'm just going to use that term because it's the term I know. So this is how they basically attached the fur to the backing. Let's try and get this to focus. There we go. It's little bits of fur and then a big space in between and more little bits of fur. Now, this is called monster faux fur, and I mean, I suppose it could be. It's like black is kind of like better hiding the backing, but the white is just absolute, like you can totally see that backing. And if you try to paint this or dye it or anything like that, that backing is going to shine through. Like, you're not going to be able to cover that backing up. So that's bottom of the barrel in my opinion as far as art doll goes. two of them that kind of like ranked even here is actually ones that would be okay if you weren't shaving it down. And those fur types are called gorilla style and Mongolian style. And so gorillas, hold on, which one is this? This one's gorilla style. You know, as you might imagine, it's kind of similar to how a gorilla's fur might be, I suppose. The backing on it is nice and solid knit, so you actually can't tell how they did this. But so, in my opinion, this would work. This would work if you were not shaving it down. Now, the minute you try to shave this down, you're gonna see an issue. And that issue is that any little imperfections in the armature where the fluff might be kind of like not super even is going to be really apparent with this, because this fur is super thin. It's really hard to get to focus on the camera. 1 second. You can actually see the backing right here through the fur just when it's flat. Again, I know it's really hard to see. The camera is not picking it up because, quite frankly, this is pure white and it's not going to.
What?
Maybe I can try to let the camera pick it up better. I don't know. We'll see. Yeah, it's still kind of hard to see. Like, the backing, if you can pull up and the backing is visible, then you don't want to shave it down, basically, or cut or trim it, or anything like that. And again, this is the gorilla. Now, this is the Mongolian. The Mongolian has a little bit of extra felting at the backing, like in the small, like in the short part of the layer. That means that it's actually not going to be super visible. But honestly, the Mongolian, it would work. It just leaves something to be desired in terms of like luster and softness, and you can tell when you have this in person that this isn't super great quality fur. And if you're making an art doll, you want to use a decent quality fur. So next we have, I actually call this Shannon's fabric because on Amazon, Shannon's fur is this stuff. Now this is called shaggy long pile fur, and this stuff is like perfect for if you want to get something and shave it down. It's really nice because it's not super thickly felted at the backing, so if you pull this apart you can see the backing a little bit, but it's so, how to put it, it's so densely flocked into the backing rather than densely felted, so the fibers aren't intermingling like felting gives you. This is more fur in the square rather than less fur but connected. So that's the difference that you're going to see with the shaggy long pile. And this will differ based on where you go. But so like I said, this is Big Z, and this is their Eco Shag, and it's their shaggy long pile, and it works really well for if you want to shave it down. If you were to make something that was small and needs like really thin legs, this would be the stuff to use. Now, a couple of my favorites is actually this, Big Z calls this their Arctic Alaskan Husky long pile, and it's the same as the other long pile, except it's made with a much softer, lustrier fur. Like, you can kind of see how shiny it is. But yeah, so it's super soft. It's really fun to pet. Now, with the way that the fur is, obviously, it would be definitely for specialty fabrics, or for specialty dolls. I know that it comes in several colors, so you might be able to find use for it. Who knows? my favorite to use as an artist is actually what they call Arctic fox fur, and it's fake. Don't get me wrong, it is fake, but it is Arctic fox fur, and it is like the softest fur you'll come across. It is super dense to the point of like you probably wouldn't want to shave this stuff down. Like maybe you could if you really had practice, but I actually like to use this for my birds where I'm not shaving it down, but I need the fur to lie flat so that it can mimic feathers if I cut it. So this is really good for like if you want to make like a life-size, excuse me, sometimes touching the fur gives like a sensory overload for me and then I cough. But this is really good for if you want to make like life-size birds. This is what I use for my birds. It is the most expensive fabric that BC carries currently. It is, I think, $40 a yard, but it is so worth it. It is so soft, and it can be shaved down. You just have to keep in mind how thick the fur is. Like, you cannot see this backing because not only is it thick, it is just a tiny bit felted so that the fibers intermingle, and like you cannot see the backing. It is really hard to actually get to see the backing with this. So yeah, this is Arctic fox fur, and like I said, all of these samples are from BZ Fabrics. And then there's one that's actually super fun. It's a different kind of fur, but it's a nice option for if you needed a coat that you didn't want to trim and you needed a thin coat, or not a thin coat, but a short coat. This is called beaver knit, and beaver knit is basically pretty across the board, but it is arguably the softest. Like compared to the Arctic fox, this stuff is the softest fur I have ever felt, and it is just amazing. It has really small, delicate furs in it that are just, they're teeny tiny, and it is super well knit. Even if I tried, I couldn't show you the backing. Like, it is super well knit. And so this is really good for if you just want something that's like panther quality fur. This would be the stuff to go with. It is amazing. So now that we've gone over the different types of fur and what they're good for and what projects, I wanted to talk a bit about other materials that we could use, because a lot of art doll artists, at least when we're talking about like textile materials, now don't get me wrong, you can use like rainbow iridescent cellophane, you can use like all different kinds of stuff, but when we're talking specifically about like the soft part of the doll, the textile part of the doll, in terms of fluff, there's a couple different things a lot of people don't realize that you can use in different ways. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about is felt. Now, I've seen people use felt to make like dragon skin, like if they're making a Night Fury art doll, sometimes they'll use felt, sometimes they'll use a more complicated fabric. But this stuff is like so versatile, it's not even funny. This is what I use when I make my wings. They are the structure part of my wings. They make a sleeve, so I basically make like a tube, I sew one end, and then I sew along the strip that I can then slide on to the bone part of my wings for my birds, and all of my feathers just glue right onto this, and then I slide it onto the wings so that I'm not messing up the feathers as I'm sewing the body. This is amazing. Like, I love felt. I think it's also called fleece. But there's another thing that you can do with it that I don't think a lot of people realize, and that's if you have a complicated doll that has fur in certain parts but no fur in other places, and you think that this would be good for the places that have no fur, but you're worried about trying to get fur onto those other places, fleece takes flocking extremely well. Now, you're gonna want to use it on a place that isn't posable, So if you're flocking on the area, make sure that's an area that isn't meant to be posed, because Fabri-Tac can leave fleece kind of crunchy. But it's really nice. I used it on my whale that I did recently, which I will probably link as the I don't know what it's called, the tag, the title, the little icon that you see before you click the video. Sorry about that, my kid got kind of rambunctious. I used this on the flippers for my whale that I then felted with fur so that it kind of looks like it's long finned. And it worked really fabulously. It worked really well. So that is one method. I'm not going to go into how to flock or fur, because there's a lot of videos on YouTube about it, and Kaypea actually has one in her Patreon. So I don't want to offer that content when Kaypea already offers that content. But so another material that I wanted to talk about was actually roving. This is just wool roving, as well as, well, again, the others later, but, so roving can be used in a few different ways. Because it's unshaped when it comes out of the bag, if you use a needle felt, a needle felting tool, you can shape this however you want it, into flames like Kaypea did for her Okami art doll, or into like fur tufts. You can basically make any irregularly shaped piece of fur using this. And it is really versatile. You can make it flat. You could even make felt out of this. This stuff, if you lay it out flat and you layer it, and then you felt it, turns into felt. It turns into fleece. So it's really cool, really versatile. And if you get it in white, you can dye it whatever colors you need, and it's really a really interesting option to work with. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about is actually yarn, which I know a lot of people, they know about wefts, right? So, I have this taped up top so that my yarn doesn't move, basically. But, like, one way to do it would be to lay it all out on a piece of paper and do it, well, on saran wrap and do it. But I find it's easiest if you just go ahead and you tape the top part of it, and then you put a layer of glue, like, right underneath, and then you just cut it off. And then it's done. And it holds it in place for you while it dries. It's really nice. But the thing that I'm really super excited about is I had this concept that actually put this video off for quite a while, because I wanted to prove the concept before I went, hey, you could do this. And so what I did was I made a piece of fur using yarn. So I took the yarn, and this is, what brand is this? This is Red Heart Soft. I took some yarn and I unwove it, and I needle felted it onto a piece of fleece. And I colored the back so that you could see how the yarn kind of pokes out of the fleece in the back. But this is completely felted together. You can tug on it gently, and you can work with this. Now, this method is really good for people who maybe can't afford to buy a really nice fur. It works for people who maybe, you know, are in a remote area where they don't necessarily have big box stores where they can buy inexpensive fur. And it also works for people who might just want something a little bit different. I've never seen a fur like this, have you? This would be like really cool for doing like Clydesdale feet, like where they have like the feathers on the feet. It is totally like, if you brush it upwards, yes, you can see the backing, but with this kind of look, that's not something that you're gonna do anyways. And it would absolutely, I am fully confident that you could sew this and make it seamless, just like any other fur with your regular stitch. Now I did this kinky and curly because I wanted to see what it would look like. I think it's really cool. It definitely like looks different. It's not something I've ever seen before. But you could take the yarn and and use parchment paper, like wrap the yarn in parchment. So you would, okay, hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. So you would take your string and you would unwind it so that it's like this, basically. And then obviously you would want to do this with longer pieces and then cut them after they're done. But you want to have your pieces, and you would lay down parchment paper, put this on it, and then lay down another layer of parchment paper and use a low heat hair straightener, like a flat iron, I think is what it's called, a hair straightener on the parchment paper to straighten it out. You want to do this very carefully because acrylic will melt, but I have seen it done successfully where you have straightened this. The other option, if you don't want to use yarn but you still have access to natural fiber, is like alpaca roving, mohair, any kind of natural fiber, like wool would be really great, because they have, you know, the special combs for straightening it out, and that would work really great. It's the same method. You would just take your felt and you would lay it down on the styrofoam. You would put the whatever your chosen fiber is down on where you're doing it. You want to do it at the bottom layer first. So the bottom of the fabric is where you want to do this at, starting, and you just jab, 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 jab. And so once, like, this combines the fibers of what you're using with the felt, basically, it's weaving them together. And so it makes a really nice, really cool piece of fabric that's completely posable because there's no glue to stiffen the fabric. And so yeah, you just, then they're attached now. And you just do the bottom layer and then go up and start working on the next layer and work on the next layer. This would best work if you have a pattern already made for your project so that you can have the fleece all cut out in the pattern and start doing the furring on the fleece directly with the pattern. That way you're not worried about trying to do it on the art doll after the fleece is already on, because if you do that, this needle is very delicate. It will break off in your art doll if you're trying to stab it into somewhere that has an armature. So you want to make sure that you're doing it flat surface on the styrofoam. You want probably, I think this is an inch. You want to have your styrofoam be at least as thick as the active part of the needle, but a little bit more is better just in case you stab too hard and you break the tip. But these are really expensive, really easy to come by. Fleece is really easy to come by. You could also use cotton if you wanted to. You just want to make sure that whatever you're using is somewhat, like, not thick, but somewhat thick. Like, it has to have fibers it can hold on to. If you try to do this on, like, polyester, it's going to be a no-go. But you could do this on cotton. You could do this on fleece. And yeah, like, this is really fun. It's actually really, really calming. And it can make some really interesting furs that you wouldn't be able to find in the store, especially if you have access to natural wool, something like Leicester long wool, or what's another one? Leicester. There's Teeswater. There's several different breeds of long wool sheep that their wool would be amazing with this method. And in order to make I didn't do very well here because this is my first attempt, but in order to make it look like natural fur, you're going to want to use those special shears that I showed you with the comb on them in order to cut each layer before you apply it. That way it leaves it a little bit uneven, because no fur is naturally even in each layer. If you try to do it naturally even, it's not going to look natural. But yeah, so this was my FAQ on how to make fur, I guess, on different kinds of fur, different kinds of materials that you can use, primarily centered around fur. And yeah, I think next we're probably going to be talking about adhesives and what kind of glues, tapes, and needles that I use, and thread, for making art dolls and what other people have used and what we found works. So stick around for that next time. If you like the video, please like it. If you dislike it, dislike it. Either way, it helps the channel. Share it with your art doll friends if you think that this is useful and that this is information that people might not know. I find it's kind of hard to know fur without having it right in front of you, but I do think that the side-by-side of the different types of fur is useful. So yeah, I will see you guys next time.